Ladies and gentlemen, we will begin our program shortly. May we kindly request everyone in the room to begin settling down. Thank you. Sige, ma'am.
Pare, pare.
Hi, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen who are already present here. Once again, we're going to be starting our program shortly, and may we kindly request everyone to please occupy the seats in front. So for those that are on the latter part of the room, if you could take the seats that are open there, we would greatly appreciate that. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, may we all please kindly request everyone in the room to settle down. We'll start in 1 minute. Thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon to all. I am Mark Jason Aldino, a principal assistant for the Department of Foreign Affairs under the Office of the United Nations and International Organizations, or UNIO, and I will be your host for today's festivities. Now, I know that we're all extremely excited to be here this afternoon, judging by the outpouring of photos that we've seen all over social media, showcasing the different IHL banners displayed by the different agencies all over the country. I'm also pleased to share that we have our foreign service posts globally, students all over the Philippines, and our fellow colleagues joining us in our YouTube live streaming, which is accompanying this event. So that means wherever you are in the world, you can join us in this momentous occasion. And without further ado, it is our honor and pleasure to welcome you to this year's celebration of the International Humanitarian Law Day 2023. Now, before we officially start with our program, we wish to invite everyone to please rise for a short prayer.
Let us place ourselves in the presence of God. God Almighty, as we celebrate International Humanitarian Law Day in advance today, we convey our gratitude to you and our esteemed partners and friends in government, the private sector, and international and local organizations extending humanitarian assistance for their involvement in this commemorative event. We ask your divine blessing so that this event will succeed in conveying the importance of adherence to international humanitarian law to a wider domestic and international audience. We pray that compassion and mercy will prevail in areas of strife, and that the fundamental principle of humanity, as enshrined in international humanitarian law, will be respected and upheld in the treatment of combatants, prisoners of war, and non-combatants. We offer our prayers for your divine intercession to protect innocent civilians in areas of armed conflict, and for the safety of humanitarian aid workers, medical workers, combatants, and also other essential workers who are heroically risking their lives to fulfill their noble missions. In these unprecedented and challenging times, we seek divine guidance so that the world may not lose sight of the power of prayer in overcoming adversities. It is our fervent prayer that more people will be inspired to follow your selfless path of serving humanity and the cause of peace. Amen.
Please remain standing for the Philippine national anthem. As per tradition, and I'm sure many of us here are familiar, every year in celebration of IHL Day, we gather as one to recite the IHL pledge to reaffirm the values and principles that we stand for. Now, we've distributed a number of copies around the room, but should you not have one, then please direct your attention to the front of your screen for the pledge. At this point, may I kindly call on Colonel Gerson Paglinawan from the Department of National Defense to lead us in this year's IHL pledge.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after. I state your name. Do hereby solemnly pledge and reaffirm that I will strictly adhere to and abide with the provisions of the international humanitarian law in the discharge of all my duties and functions. That I will always observe the fundamental principles of international humanitarian law on distinction, proportionality of force, military necessity, limitations of means and methods of warfare, humane treatment, and non-discrimination. that I will continue to recognize, respect, defend, and fulfill the dignity and rights of every person, to include those who are not or no longer participating in an armed conflict. That I will stand up for my responsibilities to my fellow individuals in my role as protector of the Filipino people and the state. That I impose this upon myself without reservation or any form of remuneration, but with the individual and collective desire of enhancing the culture of human rights and the international humanitarian law in our agency. And I further pledge that I shall remain to be an advocate for human rights, the IHL, and the rule of law. You may now lower your hand.
Thank you very much, Colonel Paglinawan, for that. And to formally begin the first part of our program, you may now take your seats. All right, and to formally begin the first part of our program, we are pleased to have with us Assistant Secretary Maria Teresa Almoela of DFA Unio to deliver her welcome remarks.
Thank you. Honorable Department of National Defense Senior Undersecretary Ireneo Espino, Presidential Human Rights Committee Secretariat Yusek Severo Catura, International Committee of Red Cross Philippines Head of Prevention Unit, Mr. Danny Murray, members of the IHL Ad Hoc Committee, colleagues from civil society organizations, IHL practitioners, ladies and gentlemen, joining us here on site and virtually, a pleasant afternoon to all of you. I am honored to welcome you to our annual celebration of the International Humanitarian Law Day, co-hosted by the Department of Foreign Affairs and the Department of National Defense. As co-chairs of the IHL Ad Hoc Committee, we affirm the solemn commitment of the Philippines to promote and respect international humanitarian law. This commitment embodies the Philippines' DNA as a champion of peace and human rights in the international community, which is also expressed in our strong humanitarian tradition and embrace of all instruments of humanitarian arms control and disarmament. Last month, our collective efforts centered on enhancing awareness and understanding of the IHL. I am pleased to inform you that the Ad Hoc Committee held an IHL baseline training last July, facilitated by the ICRC. 60 participants from various government agencies and civil society were trained on IHL principles, civilian protection strategies during armed conflicts, Philippine advocacies on IHL, and national implementation and enforcement of IHL. The committee has also taken more active steps to institutionalize its interagency and multi-stakeholder collaboration through the preparation of a revised draft executive order. We have discussed plans for incorporating IHL into the curriculum of tertiary education. The committee also issued a joint statement condemning the use of landmines and explosive ordnance by non-state actors. The committee has also ramped up its social media presence. We will also build on the Philippines' commitment to safeguard the innocent in times of war through the passing of 3 fundamental laws since 2009, and these are the Philippine Act on Crimes Against International Humanitarian Law, Genocide, and Other Crimes Against Humanity, which defines and penalizes war crimes, genocide, and crimes against humanity, and which were adopted by the Philippine state. Second is the Red Cross and Other Emblems Act of 2013, which defines the use and protection of the Red Cross, Red Crescent, and Red Crystal, and provides penalties for the misuse thereof. And finally, the third one, and not the last, I hope, the Special Protection of Children in Situations of Armed Conflict Act, which aims to protect children in situations of armed conflict from all forms of abuse and violence and prosecute persons and groups violating this law. Today, as we celebrate our past achievements, we also chart our future endeavors. While the baseline training was an essential step in deepening our knowledge and understanding of the responsible use of conventional weapons and protecting civilians during armed conflicts, we intend to go further. Today, we have organized a symposium in which we will hear different perspectives on IHL in the Philippines, including legal and civil society perspectives, while highlighting good practices and starting a conversation on IHL and emerging technologies. We need to address these more complex and emerging issues. I'm excited to announce that the Philippines will host a regional event this December, bringing together representatives from Asia Pacific states to discuss the implications of the use of autonomous weapon systems, among others, on IHL. As we press on in our journey, let us remember that collective action is required to advance peace and ensure the protection of human rights in IHL. Looking around the room, I see that our resolve is strong. In a few moments, you will see for the very first time this year's IHL Day video. We are extremely proud to launch this video as a reminder of the importance of our work and at the same time to inspire all of us to push for new frontiers in raising awareness of the rights of the vulnerable and in implementing innovative IHL programs that hold concrete, measurable impact on the lives of every Filipino. Before I close, I wish to express my sincerest appreciation to everyone for your commitment and support to humanitarian values and the committee's efforts. Let us seize today's opportunity to engage in meaningful and forward conversations and dialogue among ourselves, to share best practices and strengthen our partnerships. Thank you very much. And as we commemorate International Humanitarian Law Day, it is my hope that we will be reignited with passion and a renewed sense of purpose for international humanitarian law. Mabuhay tayong lahat.
Thank you very much for that warm welcome, ASEC. And as mentioned by ASEC Almuela in her speech, we have prepared the IHL Day 2023 video. So let us all direct our eyes towards the front of the screen to watch this short video.
And to protect victims of armed conflict, the Philippines forged its laws on IHL with unyielding resolve. Each a testament to the nation's unwavering commitment to safeguard the innocent amidst the horrors of war. Civilians are bestowed with general protection against the perils of conflict. As protected persons, they find support within IHL's grasp when held in the hands of warring parties. Those who once fought, yet laid their arms, and those taken captive must now be treated with humanity. Spare medical and religious personnel, their facilities and equipment, a Red Cross, Red Crescent, or Red Crystal in white, a mark of reverence, now commands their inviolable respect. The Philippine government is steadfast and unwavering in its commitment to continually conduct capacity development mechanisms and information and education programs on human rights at all levels of government.
I am Lieutenant Colonel Eduardo Esquives Jags, GSC. I am currently the legal officer of the Armed Forces of the Philippines Center for Law of Armed Conflict. I am part of a group in our office that is involved in policy development, policy issuance, and election. This is very material because the policy guidelines that is issued by the armed forces is cascaded down to different AFP units for their implementation and compliance, strict compliance with IHL. With that, we observe human rights as part of IHL and comply with the government rules as well as laws appertaining to human rights in IHL.
Human rights, as embodied in the spirit of IHL, should remain as our beacon in treating others with dignity.
Through the years, we have seen the improvement of IHL implementation in the country. Awareness, particularly, of the citizenry, the civil society, as well as the different agencies and departments of government have shown their commitment on IHL. IHL is not followed, there will surely be chaos. Following the principles of distinction, proportionality, humanity, and precaution. If these rules are not followed, citizens, civilians will be caught in the crossfire, will be targeted as part of the armed conflict, and civilian infrastructures also will be attacked and destroyed.
So do you think IHL is very important in your community?
Yes, it is indeed important because it observes the proper rules and fairness in certain situations.
Without IHL, who do you think are the most at risk from suffering from the negative impacts of war and conflict?
The ordinary people, the civilians, because they are not armed with any equipments to protect themselves. In certain communities in Cotabato City, I have noticed that certain people don't know or is uneducated of their rights, especially women and children, of the violence that is happening towards them. I just hope that the young people engage more in this topic because this is really important.
In the heart of armed conflict, one law reigns supreme: international humanitarian law. The law of conflict, the law of war. It stands firm, custom-built to confront and resolve the most harrowing humanitarian crisis, be it in international or domestic space. In times of armed conflict.
So I do hope that that video helps set up the mood for today's celebration and that we are all inspired to continue on
In time.
IHL related goals. Now, at this point, we are also pleased to invite on stage Mr. Danny Murray, Head of Prevention of the International Committee of the Red Cross, Philippines, to deliver his remarks.
Mr. Severo Catura, Undersecretary at Presidential Human Rights Committee Secretariat. Mr. Jesus Domingo, Undersecretary of Foreign Affairs for Civilian Security and Consular Affairs. Senior Undersecretary of National Defense, Mr. Erino Espino. Mr. Ignacio Madriaga, Undersecretary of National Defense for Strategic Assessment and Planning. Ms. Maria Teresa Almoela, Assistant Secretary of Foreign Affairs for UN and international organizations. Mr. Richard Gordon, Chairman of the Philippine Red Cross, Ms. Gwendolyn Pang, Secretary General of the Philippine Red Cross, distinguished officials and members of government, diplomatic corps, civil society organizations, honored guests, colleagues, and friends joining us here today and online. Good afternoon to everyone. Magandang hapon po. On behalf of the International Committee of the Red Cross, I would like to address thanks and appreciation to all of you for participating in this annual commemoration by the Philippines of IHL Day. As you know, International Humanitarian Law, or IHL, is also the law of armed conflict or rules of war. These legal rules set out the minimum standards of humanity that parties to an armed conflict must follow. It is the time now, more than ever, to prepare for the application of IHL, even though striving always for peace. We live in a period of tension. The relationships among many states are politically strained, and it seems more difficult to achieve progress and peace via multilateralism. At the ground level, communities are made more vulnerable by economic pressures, rising inequality, and the worsening consequences of human-induced climate change. In terms of war, for a long time, most armed conflicts have been non-international in nature. But we have seen a resurgence of armed conflict between states, international armed conflict, and the accompanying catastrophic consequences. We also witness technological developments making battlefields more complex. These include autonomous weapon systems, artificial intelligence, the resort to cyber operations, and the potential military use of outer space. In this environment around the world, questions have sometimes been raised about the relevance and applicability of IHL. However, at this crucial juncture, and especially as the Philippines commemorates IHL Day, it is of utmost importance to recall that IHL possesses something that is crucial. Namely, there is an international consensus on the need for IHL. We know this because every single state around the world has ratified and agreed to be legally bound by the Geneva Conventions, the 4 international treaties, which form the bedrock of modern IHL. All states have recognized and accepted that when there is armed conflict, there must be limits on the way that the fighting can be carried out. When there is conflict, this does not mean all-out anarchy. Civilians and those out of the fight must be protected. Soldiers should not be subject to unnecessary suffering, and the rules should be upheld so that communities can come together and rebuild at the end of conflict. At this time, when there is uncertainty about multilateralism and the prospects for peace, we must not lose sight of the world's consensus on the obligation to adhere to the basic rules of humanity in armed conflict. In fact, this is exactly the time when leaders must clearly and strongly make IHL into a political and diplomatic priority. And this is an area where the Philippines has shown important leadership domestically and abroad. As an example, last year, an international political declaration was adopted on the need to avoid the use of heavy explosive weapons in populated areas. When it was opened for signature, the Philippines was one of the first countries to endorse this declaration. The prioritization of IHL is also seen in how the Philippines last year ratified the Arms Trade Treaty and Protocol 5 to the Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons. The ongoing Philippine diplomatic advocacy on a legally binding treaty for autonomous weapon system is highly commendable. We, at the International Committee of the Red Cross, also support current steps to consider ratification of the Convention for the Protection of Cultural Property in the event of armed conflict. The government has also consistently prioritized work to make the IHL ad hoc committee a permanent body. This development is something that we also support and look forward to, especially since 2024 is a particularly important year. First, it will be the 25th anniversary of the IHL ad hoc committee, an ideal time to solidify its permanency. It will also be the 75th anniversary of the Geneva Conventions. The 34th International Conference of the Red Cross and Red Crescent will also be held that year, in Geneva. This will be a time to consolidate state and Red Cross movement adherence to some new ideas, such as autonomous weapons, where the Philippines can play a leading role, but also the basic principles of IHL. Some of these rules are very clearly presented in the tarpaulins and content that the Philippine IHL Ad hoc Committee has distributed for display all around the country. Rules such as civilians and their property should not be targeted. Persons deprived of liberty must be treated humanely. And doctors, nurses, and hospitals must be protected so that they can provide medical care to the wounded and sick, no matter which side they are on. The committee has taken the extra step of translating these rules into local languages. This is valuable as it allows even more people to learn core rules of IHL. IHL is at the very center of the mission and mandate of the ICRC. Since it was established in 1863, our organization has worked to protect the lives and dignity of victims of armed conflict and provide them with assistance. We work to promote respect for IHL and its implementation in domestic law, and we carry out our work as a neutral, impartial, and independent organization. Since IHL is at the heart of the ICRC, we very much appreciate the work of the IHL Ad hoc Committee to also promote respect for IHL, something it has been doing since 1999. This work of the committee and of the Philippines on IHL is particularly important as we find ourselves at a decisive time for the world. This year's theme focuses on IHL as a guide to the humanitarian advancement of peace. It is good to see this nuanced message. While IHL does not directly try to bring about peace, it does in fact have important consequences. If parties to the fighting work to faithfully adhere to the rules of war, this prevents violations and abuses and helps to maintain a viable pathway to durable peace agreements. On this important day, we thank the Philippine IHL Ad hoc Committee, co-chaired by the Department of Foreign Affairs and Department of National Defense, and its variable members for this continued commitment to IHL. Good afternoon again to everyone. Magandang hapon and maraming salamat.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy, for that important note on the importance of IHL. At this point, it is now our great honor to call on Senior Undersecretary Ireneo Espino of the Department of National Defense, our co-chair for the IHL Ad hoc Committee, to deliver his remarks.
Undersecretary Jesus Domingo, Undersecretary Severino Catura, Assistant Secretary Maria Almuhela, ICRC members, other IHL participants, other distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is both a pleasure and privilege to represent Secretary Gilberto Teodoro Jr. and the Department of National Defense in this International Humanitarian Law Commemoration Day with the theme IHL Guide for Humanitarian Advancement and Peace. International Humanitarian Law, or IHL, recognizes the value of every human being's life, regardless of race, nationality, or belief. It emphasizes equal treatment of individuals affected by armed conflicts with humanity and safeguarding them from violence and suffering. IHL provides a framework by which to mitigate the impact of violence on civilians and combatants while upholding human rights and the rule of law. We take pride in our country's unwavering dedication to peace, security, and human dignity, which is evident in our domestic laws such as RA 9851 or domestic IHL law, RA 1050530, the emblem law, and RA 11188, children in situation of armed conflict law. As such, we must not only celebrate our achievements, we must also prepare for the challenges that lie ahead. Armed conflicts persist in different corners of the world, and countless lives continue to be affected. Therefore, our commitment to IHL must remain steadfast and resolute. Policymakers, legal experts, humanitarian workers, and all our citizens have roles to play in advancing peace and the protection of human dignity. Let us also extend our support and appreciation to the brave men and women who risk their lives to provide humanitarian assistance in conflict zones. Their dedication and commitment to easing the suffering of others serve as an inspiration to all of us. Let us reaffirm our commitment to peace, compassion, and the values of IHL. Together, let us build a world wherein the rights and dignity of all are recognized, valued, and safeguarded. Thank you and good day to all.
Thank you very much, Senior Undersecretary Espino, for your insightful speech. Now, to deliver the IHL Day message of the Executive Secretary, we would like to call on stage Undersecretary Severo Catura of the Philippine Human Rights Committee Secretariat. Sir?
Thank you very much, Mark, for that kind introduction. Before anything else, let me just greet everyone, my fellow workers in government, Undersecretary Amba Gary, Undersecretary Espino, Assistant Secretary Isa, formerly the Ambassador and Deputy Permanent Representative to the Philippine Mission in Geneva. The members of the IHL Ad Hoc Committee, this year being led by the DFA, the ones who's responsible for all of this, partners in the NGO and civil society sectors. Now, I would like to mention some of the personalities that are really well related to the work of IHL advocacy. So there's Ma'am Lorna. And yes. I will be remiss if I will not mention a very good friend of mine from way back in the early 2000, Fred Lubang. Fred. So Fred and I have been friends since I still had a fuller hair, no? I saw the clip of one of the old pictures that I had. Sabi ko, parang that's not me. It was me pala. The members of the security sector, our uniformed men and women, thank you for being here. And other guests, of course, from the Philippine National Red Cross, International Committee of the Red Cross, guests, friends, the very competent and able staff of UNIO, who's actually behind the preparations. So magandang hapon po sa inyo. I've been given the honor of conveying to you the message of the Executive Secretary. This occasion of the 2023 IHL Day. By the way, let me just acknowledge, of course, Mr. Mary. You have guided us on our merry way towards IHL advocacy. And let me be the first one to greet you next month. A Merry Christmas. Anyway, let me proceed with my message, or the message of the Executive Secretary. This year's national observance of International Humanitarian Law Day with the theme IHL Gabay sa Makataong Pagsulong ng Kapayapaan aligns with the administration's work to realize lasting peace and sustainable development in our lifetime after decades of internal armed conflicts. The Philippines embraces IHL as a cornerstone for human rights advocacy in the midst of such challenging circumstances. In its adherence to IHL, the state acknowledges its duty to protect civilian populations and non-combatants from harm at all times, and to ensure that humanitarian assistance reaches those in need. This commitment lays the groundwork for a safer environment where human rights are respected and innocent lives are safeguarded. The integration of a human rights-based approach in addressing the root causes of armed conflict reaffirms the administration's commitment to social justice. Through genuine consultations with affected communities, the government fosters inclusivity in developing policies that resonate with people's needs, ensuring a more equitable and just society for all. These consultations empower local voices and promote socioeconomic development in marginalized communities, acting as deterrents against the allure of extremist ideologies. In a landmark move towards reconciliation and reintegration, the Philippine government shall soon establish a new amnesty package that would allow members of non-state armed groups to relinquish their arms and return to society. It shall provide a dignified pathway for former combatants to rebuild their lives, become productive citizens, and actively contribute to the nation's progress. More importantly, this initiative shall be a bold step towards ending the vicious cycle of violence and fostering a culture of forgiveness and unity that promotes national healing. On behalf of His Excellency President Ferdinand Romualdez Marcos Jr., I congratulate the different executive offices involved in organizing this event, especially the Department of Foreign Affairs, which is this year's head of the IHL Day observance. Let me acknowledge as well the Philippine National Red Cross, International Committee of the Red Cross, other non-government and international organizations, the Commission on Human Rights, and the UN country team for their partnership and participation in commemorative activities that all make for a more meaningful IHL Day 2023. Thank you. Signed, Lucas P. Bersamin, Executive Secretary. So maraming salamat po, at sa mga susunod na mga activities pa mamaya, I wish you all the best. Maraming salamat.
As always, another short yet vibrant speech from the Undersecretary Catura. And thank you, Yusek Catura, for delivering the Executive Secretary's message for us today. And now, to round out our set of speakers for this year's ceremony, we'd like to call on stage Undersecretary Jesus Domingo of DFA UXCA to please deliver your message.
Thank you. Honorable Ireneo Espino, Senior Undersecretary of the Department of National Defense, the Honorable, my good friend Noy Catura, the Presidential Human Rights Committee Secretariat Undersecretary, but who has more hair than I've had since the early 2000s. And Mr. Danny Murray, the ICRC Philippines Head of Prudential, and again, the stalwarts of the IHL community. Again, Fred also, who's managed to keep his hair intact since the early 2000s, part of our, Geneva Mafia. I think Attorney Sed Jimenez, are you here? Ah, okay. Another one, for former UN Special Rapporteur, and again, part of our Geneva community. And of course, back here at home, Philippine Red Cross stalwart for IHL, Attorney Lorna Capunan. So, and my dear friends, and our Our partners in the annual commemoration of IHL Day and IHL Month, the DND and AFP, PNP, also, and our security sector and our broader IHL community, friends, ladies and gentlemen. So very warm welcome to you all. So my statement is actually, I am reading the statement of, on behalf, I have the honor to deliver statement of the Secretary for Foreign Affairs, the Honorable Enrique A. Manalo. So it is my pleasure to celebrate this year's International Humanitarian Law Day with you. We gather here today to commemorate the fundamental principles that help preserve our humanity, even in the thick of armed conflict. As this year's theme points out, IHL guides us towards better visions of ourselves and reminds us that in situations of armed conflict, we must always maintain respect for our human dignity. The Geneva Conventions and other IHL instruments lay down the rules for humane warfare through distinction between combatants and innocent civilians, proportionality, necessity, and avoiding undue suffering, again, by reaffirming the core value of our common humanity. This respect is enshrined in our Constitution, in which we renounce war as an instrument of national policy. As we vow and stand proud and ready to defend our sovereignty and territorial integrity from all those who may wish to usurp it, the Philippines' commitment to upholding humanitarian values is truly part of the Philippine DNA, as they are our values, malasakit, pakikisama, bayanihan. We see this very commitment and the Philippines' recognized leadership on humanitarian discourse through the passing of 3 IHL-related legislations. Through these laws, we can proudly claim that international war crimes are now incorporated into our national legislation, that we have defined the uses of and protected the Red Cross and other emblems, and that we rightfully introduced special protection for children in situations of armed conflict. In our peace efforts at home, the brave women of our armed forces and law enforcement incorporate IHL in their awareness and activities to protect the most vulnerable. And we will have proudly again the opportunity to share our IHL advocacy globally as the armed forces and the Philippine National Police will return to UN peacekeeping operations. I wish to congratulate the IHL Ad Hoc Committee and for conducting the baseline training for its members this year. Capacity building is required for us to continuously upgrade our skills and the sensitivity to developments that impact on IHL. The photos in the exhibit outside remind us of what a trailblazing nation we are on IHL. We have ratified all of the main IHL instruments and work with our national and international partners to make IHL a reality. We are always among the first countries in ASEAN to sign on to and take lead on IHL. These actions reaffirm our dedication to join global efforts to restrict the use of certain weapons that indiscriminately affect civilians or cause unnecessary harm to combatants. While in Geneva, of course, our boss, Secretary Ricky Manalo, served proudly as our perm rep to Geneva, our Philippine mission to the UN Geneva, and I was very proud also to serve as one of his officers. Of course, Asek Isa, Hendrik also, and many of us in UNEO. So, and of course, I also had the privilege of serving as Assistant Secretary of UNEO. We work closely with the UN and partners, of course, the Red Cross family, on the Ottawa Convention, the Arms Trade Treaty, the Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons, Cluster Munitions Convention, and the Nuclear Weapons Ban Treaty, among others. So I'm glad to see this work continuing at this intensifying pace, and the Philippines playing a lead role as new challenges with the rise of advanced technology test the limits of IHL, in which we will discuss more of later at this afternoon's symposium. But sadly, current headline news on conflicts around the world, and even the movie Oppenheimer about the birth of nuclear weapons, are a constant reminder through social media, through news, that the challenges of protecting humanity against the effects of weapons, from bullets to nukes, is a constant reminder we must always be vigilant to defend the principles of IHL. So today's celebration of IHL Day is also an opportune time to pay tribute to the humanitarian workers and IHL practitioners of our nation and of the world. We are inspired by the dedication of the Red Cross movement, the ICRC, the Philippine Red Cross, IFRC, United Nations, other organizations, of course, civil society, in advocating for IHL and providing their expertise on the ground, especially in areas that continue to see challenges. I also commend the presence of students and youth leaders joining us virtually today. Your passion for IHL is essential in sustaining our progress and further championing peace building and conflict resolutions. As part of our outreach in the DFA, coordinated by my office, we have the Diplomatic League and its youth ambassadors and volunteer ambassadors, VAMBA, which IHL is a core advocacy. I would like to see the youth and our volunteer community as future ambassadors, foreign service officers, VAMBA, not just but of the country, but of IHL for the world. This truly shows that IHL is for all and supports the need of all sectors of society to truly take root and bear fruits for the future, for the advancement of IHL. So in conclusion, let us never cease in ensuring that the most vulnerable are protected and that empathy and human dignity guide our actions in times of armed conflict. May this celebration of IHL Day inspire us all to press on in our quest for a more peaceful and humane world for everyone. Maraming salamat po at magandang hapon sa ating lahat. Mabuhay!
Indeed, we can count on Yusek Domingo to bring in an added yet substantial flavor to our celebration. At this point, may we once again invite all of our guests of honor to the front for a photo opportunity. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the first half of this year's IHL Day celebrations. Now, for those following us on our YouTube live streams, we would kindly remind you to switch to the other live streaming link, which we have prepared for part 2 of this event or the symposium. Once again, we will resume sharply at exactly 2:40 p.m. Thank you, thank you. And for those with us here at Makati Diamond, We will have a quick break. We do have coffee and tea at the back of the room for your refreshments. Also, for the purpose of keeping to our schedule, we would like to remind everyone that we will resume for our symposium at exactly 2:40 p.m. Thank you, and please enjoy your coffee and tea.
Space student, ang malaya sila. Tapos Judge, pangalangan ng nag-cyber din. Eddie. Medyo okay din yung all foreign policy. All foreign policy. Mag-request ka lang sa atin yung send screen. It's also online PDF. Pero ito lang, ayaw ko nang mabigat. Pero so, yun na. Yung space.
Pero yun yung picture, wala na yung book kasi next thing sa amin, sa flags and buttons. Meron po gamit sa so pinauna na namin the meeting namin with UNC na invite siya to take the invitation from the December. And it's not just the law, it's also the universalization efforts ng together with Philippines. Parang na-shock. That's a new word. Yung second invitation on those weeks. So parang inuno namin sa ilalim sa ito. Yeah, kasi so meron tayo meron sa yung today yes